right. Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Joanna Stegall, and I'll be sharing with you 7 urgent steps to protect your child's IEP. I've been in education almost 40 years, and I can't think of a time that is more urgent that parents get involved with their child's services. With the shortage of staffing and with budget cuts, it's going to be the parents who understand the rights and demand the rights for their children. They're the ones that are going to be listened to. So today I'm hoping to share with you some things that will help you when you get ready to go and fight for your child and your child's rights.
Dr. Stegall, before we
Yes.
jump in a little more detail, I just want to point out a couple of things. First off, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules on a weekend to be here. We know that this is important to y'all, and I wanted to bring your attention to the chat window. We have uploaded both the 7 Urgent Steps PDF there, as well as the IEP Meeting Confidence Blueprint that we promised as a part of this webinar. And Dr. Stegall will be referencing that blueprint in today's training. Also, I would encourage and invite you to turn on your videos. We love to see your faces and have your engagement with us during this time. And with that, I'll just turn it back over to Dr. Stegall.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Just a few things about myself and why I could be someone that could provide some really valid and important information to you today. First thing is I'm a parent of a child with a disability. My daughter has a learning disability and she has ADHD. So I know firsthand where you are and what you're going through. The second thing is I've worked in the public school systems. I was a public school teacher for 25 years, so I know how the system works, which makes me able to better understand the things that parents need to do to be sure their children are receiving the services needed. The other thing is then I went on to get my Ph.D. in special ed because I became so passionate about being sure that our students, our children, are getting the services that allow them to do their very best in school and even more than that, become the very best adults version of themselves that they can. I was a researcher at the university, did a lot of great stuff, but now I have retired from the university life and I'm focused on helping parents through parent advocacy for IEPs. I was just seeing so much all the time on the news and on different chats about students not receiving their services, and it was just breaking my heart. So I've transitioned into this role, and I'm glad to have you here with me, and I hope, again, that what I have to share will be really helpful to you as you're working with the schools and getting the services your child deserves. All right, so let's start with some really great news. As much as we're hearing everywhere about all the downfall of the Department of Ed and everything that's going on, budget cuts, staffing shortages, the bottom line is the IEP process is still backed by federal and state laws, and that's not going away. Those cannot be removed. So under the Disabilities with Education Act, your child deserves to get these rights. So today what I'm going to do is talk with you more specifically about situations and what you can do to help ensure that your child is getting what they need. So let's go ahead and get started with the 7 urgent steps. These come from my personal experience and my observations as a parent, as a teacher, as a professor of future special ed teachers, as a professional developer out in the schools over, well, about 40 years. So I hope that the things that I'm seeing as urgent steps, you'll find, again, equally valued. So the first step, let's get into it. First step of the 7 steps, gather and organize your information. As we all know, memories fade, but paperwork doesn't. So you have to be the historians of your child's journey. You can't depend on the schools to do that. We've got too much turnover, too many missing files, too many vague notes. You have to have your own records to ensure that your child doesn't go through the cracks. And today I'm going to share with you how to get that documentation in order. And there are great benefits to doing this because it does take some time. So why would you want to do this? First of all, you want to be able to track the services, make sure your child is actually receiving what is written in the IEP. This requires more than a once-a-year meeting, which we'll talk about more. This requires you being more boots on the ground. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is right now, to be sure that your child is getting the services that are written in. Okay. So if you ever need to go to mediation, if things don't go well for your child and the school is digging their heels in, the district, you can't get them to do anything, then the next step would go to mediation. The first thing they're going to want to see is your paperwork. They're going to want to see how well documented your case is because they can't help you if it's not well documented. You want to stay current about your child's progress or lack of progress or plateaus. So you want to see improvement, right? You don't want them staying the same. You don't want them going down. You want to see improvement. So you cannot have what is referred to as de minimis progress. The Andrew case, which was the case that went all the way to the Supreme Court, where the parents refused to give up for their child, it was decided that de minimis is not enough, that you have to get good progress. That means that no longer can the schools like refuse to show you gains or use the same IEP goals year after year. There needs to be some progress. And that includes behavioral progress, that includes social progress, of course, academic progress. All of that needs to be recorded. And you need to know how to read those documents and see across time, across the year, not just at the end of the year, if your child was making adequate progress. Last, you want to build a timeline for your child's needs. So, as a parent, you're looking toward the future. You want to be sure your child is prepared to maybe enter the workforce or get some post secondary education or be able to live the most independently they can. That starts immediately. You have to know where your child is headed, just like any time, right? You don't know where you're going if you don't have your deadline, your point you're headed toward. So it's important to get this documentation together so that you can begin building that timeline for what's happened over the years for your child and looking forward. And remember, the schools must provide you any data that they have in your child's folder. So if you're missing things, don't be afraid to go back and ask for that. So, gonna give you a couple real life scenarios. One was there's this mom that I talked with, and her son was missing a lot of his speech therapy sessions. It's probably, if your child gets speech, there's a tremendous shortage of speech therapists. So what the district had done, they had thinned out the number of services the children were getting to try to get the therapist to be able to serve more students. But by doing that, Johnny, this mom's son, wasn't getting his therapy. In fact, when she went and checked, he didn't get 8 out of the last 12 therapy sessions for speech that he was supposed to get. And he was regressing. The mom could tell differences in his speech and was really concerned and upset about that. The good thing is she had been keeping track of these speech sessions, so she was able to go to the school with data, not empty threats, 'cause empty threats won't get you anywhere, but distance the teachers and the administrators, but with data. And so she was able to get, with the data that she had, she was able to get them to provide her with some compensatory or makeup services. So you can go back in the past, but you can move forward and be sure that if the district owes it to you, that you get where you're supposed to get according to what's in the IEP. Here's another scenario. There can be things called hidden regression.
Hey,
Hidden regression.
Dr. Stegall, if I can,
Yeah,
just a question. You mentioned compensatory services. So
right.
first off, I want to know anybody that's in attendance, have any of you had that situation or have heard from the school, oh, we can't provide this anymore? Put a one in the chat if you've run into situations like this. And then if you can maybe describe compensatory services, or are you going to talk about that later?
In this case that I shared, it was compensatory services for lack of speech therapy, and that was a part of that student's plan. But really, compensatory services can be for anything that your child has not been receiving that is in their IEP. So
Well,
it's
when
not limited to speech or OT or whatever was. That's a contract between you and the school, and they have to live up to their end of it.
So what you're saying is that they have to deliver those services even though they were missed. Is that
That's
okay?
right. If you have the data, right, they're not gonna volunteer to do this for you, but if you have the data and you can show them, then yes, they should, or they're breaking the federal law.
Great. Okay. Thanks.
Welcome. Okay. So sometimes as parents, it's like we have to think like investigators. We have to look for that cause and effect and see what's going on. I was talking to a woman, I'll call her Maria, and Maria's daughter really struggled with math, dyscalculia, but with a parapro in the room helping her, she was doing really well. In fact, she was even coming home and able to work on her homework by herself, which she'd not been able to do before. Then they took away the parapro. And at first, the mom didn't realize that's what was going on. She just noticed that her child wasn't doing their homework anymore and was really frustrated about math, and her grades were dropping. So she went to the team, the IEP team, and they acknowledged the reduction of support that, and they also couldn't deny that there had been some negative consequences from that. So they put into place daily check-ins and some reteaching strategies to get her caught back up and to be sure that she wasn't struggling in the future. Got to keep up with that data.
Dr. Stegall, kind of related. We had someone ask the question is what if they stipulate things in order to get services?
What I would need to know by stipulate what that means exactly.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead and proceed? Maybe we can get some clarity.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'd love to answer that if I can know what is being stipulated. So, what you need to do is go ahead and take time if you haven't yet and start establishing an IEP binder or folder. This may take you some time to get all the documents together. So, you may want to set a goal of being sure that you have all of that together by the beginning of next school year. The main thing is for you to understand that if you don't have all of these documents, if the school has records of these, they should provide them to you. That should be the IEPs, not just the current IEPs, but they have records of the past IEPs too, so you can look at any patterns across time that could be helpful in setting your child's annual goals. Any kind of evaluations, you should be getting regular progress monitoring data. You should be aware of the therapy that your child is getting, and that has to be logged. So you should get that. Any kind of communication back and forth, if you send an email, print it out and put it in your binder because that is again, your data, your history of their communications. Any kind of behavior reports, medical diagnosis, samples of schoolwork where you can show, especially if you're concerned about regression or plateauing, so you have that data in black and white that you can share with them. There's some crazy things going on out there, and I know there are a lot of teachers, like I said, I was one that are doing a lot of really great things for kids, but let me tell you, I there was this child this time of year, a lot of the schools are taking their field trips. This mom, she had gotten the permission slip for her child to go on this field trip. She filled it out, sent it back in with the money to go on the field trip. A day before the field trip, she got notified by the school that her child would not be allowed to attend the field trip. And she said, "I don't understand this," because they had not been sending home he has an emotional behavioral need, but they had not been sending home any documentation that he was struggling at school. So she didn't know at all that this could happen to him. And all she asked is that they would let her be the one to tell him and not to do it at school. The teachers announced it in front of the whole class that he was not going to be able to go because of his behaviors. That's just horrendous. Those teachers need to know those parents are there and they're listening and they're watching. And I know all teachers aren't like that. We've got a lot of great teachers, like I said, but that happens more often than I'd like to admit, that just really callous, unfeeling things happen to our
So,
students.
Dr. Stegall, back on that question, it relates to that about stipulating things in order to get services. She
Yes.
responded and said for her to get OT, they required her to come to school without schedule of seeing OT and then have to play her instrument in front of the class with the OT watching before she could get services.
What? What? No. If your child has a disability, according to IDEA, and that's been documented, your child is to receive services. It's not based on your child's performance. The child should not be humiliated to have to perform in front of a class when they know that the child needs services, and probably because the child is not receiving adequate services, they're not doing well in the class. So that would be very embarrassing and humiliating. There is nowhere in IDA that says you have to perform in front of an audience to get your services. That is absolutely ridiculous. I can't even believe that. I'm so sorry that's happening. Yeah, never, never should that ever happen. And then they try to figure out why so many of our kids don't like school, don't wanna go. Hello, treat them fair, treat them kindly. Don't do that. Okay, if we're ready, I'll move on. I know there's so much we could be talking about. Oh, goodness. So, I put together checklists for your empowerment because the instances that I see, parents have to be the ones in charge. I know a lot of parents are hiring advocates, and that's fine, but you know your child best. You know your child best. Don't you be afraid to stand up for your child's rights and your rights through IDEA. So, like I said, you're going to want to print all of this out. You, especially anything that you're concerned about. And parents can draft what is called an input statement, which they should have told you about. But if you're wanting to provide feedback on what you think should be provided to your child, you can do that and you can give your rationale for why you think these services are important, or why you think an increase in services would be important, or why they need to be more stringent about following what was in their behavior intervention plan for their student. All of those things you can put in a parent input letter that has to become a part of the legal document in the IEP. So don't overlook that. Okay, let's move on. That's a lot on step one, but that is such a critical aspect of what needs to happen. And it really has to happen in order for these other steps to fall into place. And we're going to give you that free download where you can actually use that to help you stay on track beyond this presentation. So if you're not picking up on everything that I'm saying, it's a lot, and we're going to provide you documents to help you be able to continue to work on your child's services that they're getting in the school to make sure that they're getting what they need to. All right, step two. Once you get all the documents together, you need to stay on top of reviewing this data. I know it's a lot. I know parents are busy, but you've got to see how they're doing on the annual progress. So if your child is supposed to make a certain amount of gains in 1 year, what does that look like after 1 9 week? They should be at least a fourth of the way there, right? Because you got 4 9 weeks. So by the midpoint in the school year, they're not halfway to where they're supposed to be for their goal. The chances are they're not going to reach their goal. So that might mean that there needs to be an increase in the services. Something needs to be changed to intensify the services, but it cannot go on like that. The first thing that you'll read, and really what's most important next to the goals, would be what is called the present levels. Sometimes that's referred to the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. And functional performance can be anything that has to do with life skills, work skills. Think of the present levels as your GPS. It tells you where your child is today and where your child needs to go, right? So it's the roadmap. So you need to know in that present levels, they should have not only your current, what your child can do, but it should also can include what they can't do and what they need to do, what they need to do that year. And that needs to be specific, right? They can't just say they need to increase their reading, for example. There are a lot of different aspects in reading that would need to be focused on, and how are they going to measure that? So be sure that you get a good PLAF statement, because that's going to be setting up the groundwork for your IEP goals. Then in the IEP goals, you need to look for things to make sure that this is included. Is the IEP goal measurable? And if so, how are you going to know how your child's doing on it? Are they tracking? Is your teacher keeping up with how your child's doing on the goal? Are they tracking it like they're supposed to? They should be having consistent data collected. Was it achieved? Like I said, look at those short-term goals, not just the annual goal, to make sure they're making progress, okay? So you wanna look for those patterns, academic, behavioral, social, so you can understand what your child's doing, and you can make sure that it's not too late. You don't wanna wait till your child is in high school to figure out that they're not gonna be able to graduate with a diploma, and you didn't know that, right? Or they thought they were gonna be able to go into a work study program and they're not because the school didn't get it set up. Lots and lots of different things can happen when they're younger, but also across the years. That's why we got to stay on top of what's going on. You might have a great teacher this year and everything's going well. What's going to next year going to look like is going to be the best for the kids whose parents are the most active in this progress. So when you're reviewing the progress, you need to ask, is my child meeting the IEP goal? And if not, why? What's going to change? They determined that this was a valid goal for your child. They should never decrease the goal. If anything, it should be increased. And you need to be sure that they're providing the strategies that they need to and the supports to make sure your child does reach the goal. Not reaching the goal should not be an option. And in other work I do, I talk about ways that you can know yourself whether or not it is a valid goal that they've set. I've seen some teachers want to make really easy to achieve goals because they don't want to not achieve it. That's playing a game. That's not what we need to do for our students. So, real life scenario. Like I talked about, sometimes kids hit plateaus. This one was in reading, and the student had a year-long goal of increasing the words read per minute, so working on reading fluency, to 50. The mom noticed that it's doing pretty good the first semester and then it started plateauing after Christmas and staying right around 40. So the goal in the year was 50. So the mom was like, "Hey, what are we going to do? We haven't moved." She called an IEP meeting because we can call the IEP meetings. We do not have to wait on them. Okay. And they must meet with us. And she just said, "Look, I've noticed that my son hasn't moved in months in his reading goal. What are we going to do to intensify that?" And with her having that data and knowing what she's talking about, she was able to get the team to agree to add a new evidence-based program. In other work, I talk about what are evidence-based program and weekly progress reports sent home to her so she could see. Okay, she's wanted to support her child's progress, so she needed to know how to best do that. And thankfully, because she had the data, the school did it. All right. So I see parents questioning, they said that he met his goals, so they're wanting to take away special ed services. Most students are 2 to 3 grade levels below their peers. So unless your child is where their peers are at that level, for instance, if 5th grader is performing in math with dyscalculia at the 5th grade level, they should continue to get services. Just because they met their goal of knowing their basic facts or whatever, there's a whole plethora of other types of math skills beyond that. So that's where the type of IEP goals that are set up really matter, and they need to be all encompassing whatever your child needs to get them as close to their grade level as possible in this instance. Another one was a parent realized that her son Cameron had these goals, but there were things that were written into the PLAF statement or those present levels that were not being, nothing was happening with these goals at school or for this need at school, I should say. So what happened was Cameron's parent said, "You have in here in his present levels that he has trouble organizing." And I agree, I see that at home too, and it is an area of weakness for him. Why does he not have any goals written into his IEP specifically for teaching him strategies for organizing? Because there are what are called self-regulation strategy development, which is an evidence-based practice, which teachers need to be using for students that have skills deficits outside of the academics. So they did that because the mom knew to ask for it and it was in the present levels. And you can ask for things to be added to the present levels if you don't feel like they've written it substantially enough.
Dr. Stegall, if I may,
Yeah.
if you have had that where you feel that there are services that your child needs, but are not included in the RFP, put a 1 in the chat.
I see it so often. And parents don't know that those other things like organization, not being able to communicate effectively, not being able to make friends at recess, feeling like they're getting picked on, all those things can be addressed through the IEP. So it's not just that one area of primary diagnosis. They need to look at the whole child and see how can we help this child be the best that he or she can be. And sometimes those are skills outside of what the teachers are thinking about, right? Because 'Cause they're thinking about grades. They're thinking about standards and not considering that it's important you help them see your whole child, not just that one aspect. Is that good? All right, let's go on. So, some questions you can ask. If your child's having some issues with behavior, social, academics, you be sure those are addressed, like I said. And then always ask for the data examples. If they agree that they're going to work with your child on organization, don't stop there. Okay, what are we doing? What are the steps you're going to be giving him? How are you going to measure whether or not these steps are actually working? And when will you expect him to be able to do this on his own? All right. It has to be specific. They can't just say, yeah, we'll help them with organization. That's not going to get you anywhere because that can be very vague, right? I tell him every day to be sure he's written down his homework. That's not going to change his organization. So be sure that you're very specific. And you can ask for the school to update the present levels if there's something that's come up that you didn't realize at your last IEP meeting. Don't wait until your next scheduled IEP meeting. You go ahead and get that added in there and get them to start providing those services. So, the takeaway from this one is if there's a gap that needs to be addressed, be sure that it's being addressed at the school level. If not, go beyond the school. We'll talk about that. All right. So your IEP goals are coming from the gaps that your child has. That's why they qualified. And that's the services that they are promised through IDEA, federal government, that they're going to receive. You're the expert on your child. Don't let the schools tell you what your child needs over trump what you see your child need. Don't let them say, "Oh, no, I don't think that's true," or you can ask for them to collect more data. If they're like, his organization skills don't seem to be bothering him so much," and you're like, every day he gets home and he doesn't know what his homework is and he can't find it. So you can ask them to start collecting specific data to help build your case. So there was another example when I couldn't believe this. The school bus that this child needed to ride on because he had some physical needs, left the school an hour every day, every year he was in school, earlier than all the other students left. You can't do that. You're taking away their faith, the free and appropriate public education. That means you're okay, the school is okay with him missing an hour of services every single day over years. That's 180 hours a school year, time a number of years. It really adds up. And the school's saying that's the best they could do because they had a shortage of buses, or that's not your problem. Not your problem. Don't let them try to make that your issue. But they will if you don't stand up. So you've got to know your legal rights. Even in these lean times, I know school budgets are tight and I know services might feel stretched, but this federal and state laws have not changed. When you know your rights, you'll be better equipped. You can stand firm. And if there's no funding, don't let the budget cut silence you. That cannot be a reason for your child to not receive the services that have been determined that your child needs.
Dr. Stegall, we had a
Yes.
question. Can
Okay.
you describe what FAPE means? What does it stand for?
Yes. FAPE is guaranteed through IDEA. It stands for Free and Appropriate Public Education. And that's where they provide highly specialized and individualized services based on your particular child's needs. Most of the law cases that have gone to court because they couldn't work it out through mitigation, And where the parents, families have won is because of a lack of free and appropriate public education or FAPE. Because of things like we're talking about today, right? Where there's a need, the school says we can't meet that need, even though that's the best. They have to meet the need. You might not agree with how they choose to meet it, and that's why you're going to need them collecting data so they can show you that their plan is working or it's not. So you can go back and talk about it some more and get something better in place. But free and appropriate public education, that means they're going to be in the least restrictive environment with with non-disabled peers to the maximum amount that they can be. So they can't say to you, we only have this one class where the students with learning disabilities go each day, and that's in conflict with something else. And they can't make it, you should not have to mold yourself to fit into their system. But that's what they want you to do in most cases. So you've got to be willing to hold them accountable not to do that. Is that enough for now? So under IDEA, parents, you are providing a guaranteed meaningful participation, not just sitting there at the IEP meeting or being invited to the IEP meeting. You need to be heard at the IEP meeting. And I do other work helping parents understand how to do that. There should not be any denials due to funding, like we've talked about. And beyond that, there are procedural safeguards for the families, and you need to know what those are. So, through meaningful participation, you have an active right to be there and to be heard. You have an active voice, so you can let them know if you do not agree with what is being said. And if they refuse to do what you feel like is needed, there's a protection for you there too. We'll talk about in just a few minutes. So don't let them shut you out. Okay. And oh, just this week, there was a mom whose child receives some behavioral therapy outside of school from a private provider. And she'd invited this person to come to the annual IEP meeting. She let the school know ahead of time, which she should, because that's just being respectful, right, to the school to let them know. And the school told me it was against school policies. And that behavior analysis could not be there at the IEP meeting. That is illegal. The federal law trumps school district policies. That can't be a policy. Federal law. You should be able to bring anyone in there that could provide added insight, added data on your child that can help the school know how to better meet the needs of your child. And the school should not be afraid of that. What are they doing? What are they doing that they would be afraid for you to bring someone in there with you that has data that can be helpful for your child? Absolutely ridiculous. Mm. Okay, like we said, they cannot say, "We don't have a speech therapist," or "We don't have anyone to give your child occupational therapy," then they need to provide a compensation for that. Okay, so you can't, are you gonna pay for my child to go get it privately over here? Because the child, you've said in the IEP, the child needs these services. If you're not able to provide them, then figure out how. And you have procedural safeguards. Of course, the schools aren't going to tell you typically about this, but this is a legal right that you have the right to get mediation if needed. So if you and the school district cannot come to an agreement, you have the right to you can contact your district, you can contact the State Department, and they have a person called an ombudsman at the State Department level whose job is to try to mend fences between schools and parents. And they can give you someone for free to meet with you and the school IEP team to try to come to an agreement. At that point, if you're not satisfied after mediation, because there's some things that they just won't provide that you're just adamant that it's not right, your child should receive it, then you can file a state complaint. If the state is not able to get it ironed out to your satisfaction, that's when you can go to due process. That's when you can go to the courts. If you choose to go to the courts, it's important for you to know if you win, the school district has to pay you back all of your fees that were charged if you get a lawyer or an advocate or whatever. Important to know your rights. Step 4. We're at step 4, midway through, plan your meeting strategy and key requests. If you go in the meeting and you don't know what you want, of course, you're probably not gonna get it, right? We've already established that. So it'd be like going to court without your case. Okay, you have to know, and that's why gathering the data is so essential, so that you know what you need to ask for and what your child deserves and nothing less. That will help you to stay calmer. It'll help you stay more focused and more persuasive than going in there cold. All right. So, how do you prepare for this? List your specific concern. He's missed 6 speech sessions, or there's been no progress in reading since January. What can we do about that? Then you identify the desired actions. What do you need to see? They can say anything, but what boots to the ground? What are they going to do? What are they going to do? And get it in writing. For example, school may be wanting to pull some occupational therapy minutes and say, oh, your child's made progress. So we think 40 minutes a week is not necessary. We want to back it down to 25. Then they're going to have to collect data and show that they're still are able to make appropriate progress, ambitious progress, yet actually doable progress with your child if they're insistent upon doing that. It's a good thing for you to try to stay diplomatic, because if you get really angry or defensive, they're going to see you as irrational and they're not going to listen to you as well. And it is very emotional. I know, I've been there. I've cried at IEP meetings. I've gotten frustrated at IEP meetings. But what you want to do is keep the conversation going. And if you get too emotional, or if they do, you may have to stop the meeting and then reschedule it for another time when everybody can be more settled down and you can think it through what you need to do. So instead of saying something like what you want to say, what I'd want to say, no way am I going to let you reduce my child's services. You could say, I'm concerned that if you reduce my child's services, that we're not going to continue to meet his need in this area. So how are we going to be sure that need is being met? Or it could be something that is not acceptable. Instead of saying that is not acceptable, try, I'd like to better understand how this decision supports her current needs. Okay, so write everything down. When you're in the IEP meeting, make your little notes. Go in there with notes, make notes during the meeting. It's very important. So you can be a fierce competitor, right? Those of you that have been in sports, you know that you can be a fierce competitor without being combative. And that's your goal as the parent. They need to listen to you, respect you, but they don't need to be avoiding you, afraid of you because you can't handle yourself. But you do want to be assertive. That can be a collaborative, assertive tone. It doesn't have to be a battle. Even if you're in disagreement, follow the steps. Don't get angry. Know that all the rights are on your side and your child's side. And that will help you calm down. It might be more of a hassle, but you can get your child what they need according to the law and what's in the IEP. So you want to figure out how to hit that right chord with them to where you are attempting to be collaborative. And a lot of that comes from how you ask your questions and how prepared you are for the meeting. And then also being firm. Use that mama's voice, not yelling, but a firm voice. All right. Another thing you can do is start the meeting positive. Let's get it started on a good note. So begin by saying something positive about the teachers and some real efforts that you've seen. Sometimes you have to look a while. Some of you may feel to find that, but find some things you can say positive. Okay, because that will really help to lead their effort. Thank you for working with Sam on his writing, for example. He seems to be enjoying writing more than he used to, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate your consistent communication with me about how he's doing in writing. Teachers appreciate that. Use we language so that you don't set it up like a battlefield. Be sure that you say things like, I know we all want what's best for Mary, especially with the transition to middle school. So let's discuss how that's going to occur. That would be in her best interest. We are all trying to help her feel more confident. We are all trying to make her feel more supported. So they see that you see yourself as an important member of their team. And 7, stay solution focused. Don't let them stop. Don't let them stop you if you know that the service should be one. Now, sometimes parents, it's a little side note, be sure you're being realistic because you don't want, if you're being unrealistic, they're just going to dismiss you and you're not going to get anywhere. But be realistic, and how you realistic is you go back to that present levels form and you go back to those IEP goals. You need to stay solution focused. How do we ensure that this child is still going to meet her social skills if you're going to be taking away the support? What is the alternate plan to address the same need if this is removed? You're discussing putting my son in a separate school for his behaviors, but I've not seen where you're implementing the behavior intervention plan. Why is that not occurring? Okay, so you need to ask the right questions. Keep it calm but firm, like I've said. You're the one in charge. I want to talk to you about what a prior written notice is. I mentioned that earlier. A prior written notice is one of the most powerful legal tools that you have in your toolbox as a parent. Prior written notice means that it is a formal, legally binding document, whereas the school proposes to end, add, change, or remove something in the IEP. They must write that if you are in disagreement. So if you're refusing to agree with them for a change in the services, they should provide you a prior written notice, and that goes into the IEP. And then you can send them an email and just follow up with them on that, because that will give you data that you need that they refuse to do it, so they can't come back and say, oh, no, we didn't. We were going to do that, or anything like that, right? So they might suggest cutting or reducing support. This is what's going to get. So since I don't agree with this change, I'd like a prior written notice outlining the team's decisions and the reasoning behind it. It, like I said, it provides that official record. So you want to have that. After the IEP meeting, you want to confirm in writing what was discussed. And remember, you don't have to sign the IEP at that meeting. If things were left unresolved, you can tell them that you're going to need another meeting and that you, at this point, are not able to sign the IEP the way it is written. You just need it all in writing. Okay, so you're going to want to, after the meeting, this is what you need to do after the meeting. You need to obtain the updated IEP, check it, check to make sure that the services in there are the services that you've requested. Okay, so read it carefully. If something's not the way that you thought that it was going to be, that's okay. Ask for clarifications. Don't sign it until you get some clarified answers and are sure you're okay with that. So you might need to get things corrected. You can send, like I said, you want to keep that communication open. So send an email, and in the email, put the things that you understood from the IEP meeting, so you can create your paper trail, so that they can't later try to go back and say, oh no, we never said we would do that. Last step. Whoops. Monitor the implementation and follow up. The IEP plan is not just a promise. It's the law. Okay, they have to do it. Too often the services will slip through the cracks due to staff shortages. You know how it's going, lack of funding, lack of oversight. So your follow-up is very important, so they know you heard them at the meeting and that you're engaged. So stay on top of it. Check it often. Don't wait to the next IEP meeting to find out something's wrong. I guess it's sad for parents when it's been, and their child, after it's been a whole year and they go to the IEP meeting, and that's when they find out that their child's not met their goals. That's unfortunate, and it's too late. Be sure you're tracking the progress in the missed sessions, so that if your child needs to get compensatory services or makeup services, that you hold the school accountable for providing those. However they can provide them, it's not on you, it's on them to do that. And stay involved. Your advocacy doesn't end after the meeting, and it doesn't ever end When you have a child with a disability, you find yourself often having to be the advocate until your child's of age where they can if they're able to advocate for themselves. And if they're not, then you'll continue to be an important piece of this. You wanna track the services, like we've said, if they've been delivered, modified, missed. So, I've gone through pretty quickly these 7 steps, and they are urgent steps because there's a limited supply and a bigger demand. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way, but that is the way it is. So, you're gonna need to get in there, and I wanna help you feel empowered to know what to do. You can hire an advocate. I've heard a lot of different stories about advocates and how well they're able to do and what their costs are. That's scary for me. I would much rather empower you to be your child's best advocate because you do know your child the best. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Greg, who's going to be talking with us. Oh boy, how many of you are feeling like this right now?
Thank you, Dr. Stegall. Yes. So you may be feeling like this right now. I know that was a lot of information, crucial information for all of you attending. And it's understandable if that's how you're feeling. I will just convey that what Dr. Stegall covered in that brief time that we've had is just scratching the surface. But there's only so much that she can get through in under an hour. And I know your time is very busy and on a weekend. And so there's so much we appreciate that you showing up here for. All right. But before we wrap up, we're going to have a Q&A. And so we hope you stick around here and we have a Q&A and we'll open up the chat window and have some questions and Dr. Stegall will come back, address those. But before that happens, I want to acknowledge something very important, that you took the step to download the 7 urgent steps to protect your child's IEP. And then you showed up today live on a weekend to learn how to apply them. And you've stayed until the end because deep down, you know that ultimately you're the one that's going to have to advocate to provide the best for your child. And you're here and you're willing to be the one to do that. And that says everything about who you are. You're not just hoping for things to get better. You're ready to lead the charge for your child. And that kind of courage, quite frankly, it's rare and it's powerful. So over the past couple of months, as the headlines have worsened, more DOE cuts, more OCR offices being shut down, Dr. Stegall asked herself, how can she take what she's lived, what she's researched, what she's taught for decades, and put it into something that truly supports parents like you, providing you with an action plan to ensure your child's IEP works for you and your child. Something that would help you turn overwhelm into confidence and questions into strategy and fear into results that work. And that's when she came up with the concept of what she calls the IEP Mastery and Advocacy Bootcamp. And yes, we're going to tell you about that. Before I do that, I just want to remind you that she was a professor. She walked away from a secure career as a tenured department chair in the College of Education at a university teaching future special education teachers for the last 13 years. And with everything that's happening right now with the Department of Education, she felt a calling to step away from that and do something that would have a real impact on the lives of children with disabilities and the lives of their parents by providing real solutions to try to help solve those problems that you're facing every day with your child's education. And if it's all right with you, I'd love to take a few minutes and walk through what Dr. Stegall has created with the IEP Mastery and Advocacy Bootcamp so that you can actually see how this bootcamp might change everything for your child's education. So I'm hopeful that you're okay with that for a few minutes, and then we're going to jump into the Q&A. So let's get into it. I'll just go through this real quickly so we can get to the Q&A because I know those questions are going to be very important for you. And so let me talk about what's included when you join the IEP Mastery and Advocacy Bootcamp community. First, it launches June 9th, and it delivers every strategy, template, and live coaching that you'll need to walk into next school year fully prepared with the confidence that you need. So instead of that pit in the stomach feeling and fear that your child's services might slip away or that they'll cut this and you don't know how to react or respond or to counter that, is that you'll actually have the relief of knowing that you secured an expert-backed plan that they deserve, that your child deserves. And so to facilitate that with the boot camp, we've created a 6-week self-paced and weekly live Q&A program. And with this, you'll progress self-paced online lessons and downloadable materials. And then we meet live each week for support and Q&A over that week's materials to turn that knowledge into confident real-time advocacy for your specific child's situation. Week 1, I'm going to go through these very quickly, is understanding IEP fundamentals and your rights. You'll learn what FAPE really means and how to protect it, decode IDEA and the IEP line by line, a guided audit, clarity on your child's goals, services, and accommodations, a Q&A, what to do if the school isn't following the IEP plan or blames the budget. Week 2, assessing your child's IEP needs and strengthening the plan. You find red flags and service gaps in your child's IEP. Use data to decide what's working and what's not. Worksheets, there's a SWOT work, analysis and progress monitoring. SWOT is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's a good way to analyze areas and gaps in your child's IEP. And in the Q&A, we'll bring, your real IEP concerns for feedback. Week 3, effective communication and documentation strategies. Build your parent paper trail. Draft real letters with our fill-in-the-blank templates. We have a whole host of templates that's a part of this that you'll get. Start a communication log that you'll keep for life. And then Q&A, help you with the tone and the phrasing and those tricky conversations when they say they just can't provide the service anymore. Week 4, mastering the IEP meeting, confidence and collaboration. Build a strong parent input statement. The parent input statement is something that you can write that goes into the IEP document as documentation as well. Plan your script, your opening script, and your top concerns for the meeting. Learn about meeting dynamics and how to disagree productively. I know Dr. Stegall talked about some of those approaches. And Q&A, practice and rehearse with live role play support. Week 5, advanced advocacy, overcoming roadblocks. Learn how to escalate when a school says no. Draft letters for missed services or state complaints. Plan alternate solutions. I know she talked about compensatory services and what can be provided there and what needs to be provided there. And then workshop your current IEP challenges with real solutions. Week 6 is basically pulling it all together and securing the future and long-term planning for your child's IEP success. And transition goals and reviews, and basically celebrating your advocacy transformation over the course of the 6 weeks, and final expert wrap-up support. So what you get, just as a wrap-up again, and we're doing this as a one-time limited offer here because you showed up for this live webinar. It's the 6-week boot camp, which has, again, understand your IEP fundamentals and rights, assessing your child's IEP needs and strengths, strengthening the plan, effective communication and documentation, mastering the IEP meeting, advanced advocacy, securing the future, and every week, live Q&A to get your questions answered. What we're offering that is $297 value, which we list on our website, and it sells for $297. But because you showed up here, you have an active interest in helping your child. That's not the price that we're asking you to pay. That's not the price that you will need to pay. And also because you're clearly motivated to find the best support for your child. Dr. Stegall thought about what else she could include to help you really be successful with that. So in addition to the boot camp, which we have on our website, she is including what she calls the ultimate IEP letter and document swipe file. She knows for IEPs that there's issues that arise. And so she's crafted 24 letter and email templates for all these different kinds of scenarios. Evaluations, missed services, refusals, calling for review, prior written notice, which is a very important thing that you need to know about and has value for you. And all of these things so that you know how to say the right thing, even under pressure, and ensure that your child gets you what you need. And that's a $199 value that is added to that. And so now we have with the combined, the 6-week boot camp, $297 value. Bonus 1, the IEP letter and document swipe file, $199 value. And then next to that, Dr. Stegall was like, okay, what else can I provide to give them the knowledge that they need to best support their child and their child's IEP? And so she came up with this concept of an IEP goal bank, an accommodation ideas guide. So it's 100 plus IEP goal and accommodation examples by category: reading, writing, math, social skills, communication, executive function, sensory processing, behavioral challenges, self advocacy. They're parent friendly, written, but they're also district aligned so that they're written in a way that the district knows that what you're doing and that they need to respond appropriately. That's $149 value. So now we've got the boot camp, bonus one, bonus two. And she said, okay, I don't think that's still enough. I want to make sure that these parents are really well supported with this. So she came up with an IEP rights cheat sheet. IDEA and Section 504 laws and regulations are very complex. They're written in legalese. So she's taken that and created a parent-friendly overview of all of these rights, timelines, procedural safeguards, your roles and rights during the IEP meetings. And it's like having a special ed attorney in your back pocket before each meeting. And that's $129 value. So now we've got the boot camp, 6 weeks with live weekly Q&As, the ultimate IEP letter and document swipe file, the IEP goal bank and accommodation ideas guide, the IEP rights cheat sheet, and Dr. Stegall was still not done. And she said, let's help the parents organize all this information. They need help understanding how to put this all together. So she created the IEP Meeting Mastery Printable Planner. So these are templates for the pre-meeting, mid-meeting, follow-up planning, year-to-glance calendar, meeting prep checklist, parent input statement, worksheets, meeting agenda builder, IEP meeting notes template, follow-up task tracker, communication log, and more. And so it'll help you track the goals, the outcomes, and all the next steps. And you can keep all of that organized in one place. And that's a $99 value that she's added. So now we've got the boot camp, we've got the ultimate IEP letter and document swipe file, we've got the IEP goal bank and accommodation ideas guide, we've got the IEP rights cheat sheet, we've got the IEP meeting mastery printable planner, and Dr. Stegall was still thinking, okay, what would be the one thing that would really set these parents up for success? And so on top of all of those bonuses, she decided to add, and this is a today only bonus, a fast action private one-to-one consultation with Dr. Stegall. So this is a 45-minute Zoom strategy session with Dr. Stegall to discuss your specific child's IEP, meeting prep or immediate crisis, and personalized coaching to help you create a plan to move forward with this. And that's a $150 value that she's adding. So that's a live one-on-one with Dr. Stegall. So let's put it all together. For this one-time limited offer, because you came and you showed up today, we don't offer this on our website. All you get on the website is the top item, IEP Mastery Advocacy Bootcamp for $297. But here today, we're including that. We're including the ultimate IEP letter and document swipe file, the IEP goal bank accommodation ideas, the IEP rights cheat sheet, the IEP mastery planner, and the opportunity, if you act today, to get a private one-on-one consultation with Dr. Stegall. That total value is over $1,000, $1,023. But today, because you showed up, because you're taking an active role, that we're going to offer this today for only $197 and provide you access to that complete package. And we're going to offer it with 2 monthly payments. So you can split that in half and pay over 2 months to pay that today. Okay, I want to get out of the way here just to show you and walk you through it real quick. As I mentioned, the total value is over $1,000. However, because you showed up today, we're offering it for $197, and you can get in 2 easy monthly payments of only $98.50 each. And this offer is going to be out there through Tuesday night. We want to give you some time to think about it. Maybe you have to speak with someone, your partner, regarding making this decision. We understand that. But for those that also know that what was brought by Dr. Stegall today is important and really want to take the next step, we have a fast action bonus that you have until tonight to get that free IEP strategy session, the one-on-one with Dr. Stegall. And so you have up until 11:30 tonight to make that offer. You just simply enter your information here. And if you want to do the 2 monthly payments, you just come to this drop down and you select 2 monthly payments, and it'll change that so that then you're only paying the 98.50 for 2 payments over the next 2 months.